I'm going to get controversial here, but let me tell you that not only will you see AI automatically generate draft reports for chest x-rays, you will see automated draft reporting in CT exams. Now, to be honest with you, for chest x-rays, it wasn't much of a prediction because I knew technologically we already had the capability. For example, at the RSNA 2023 annual meeting, when I was a CMO at RedAI, we demonstrated a proof of concept for automatically generating a report from a chest x-ray. Now, the prediction part was talking about doing the same thing with CT exams. So was I right? Most recently, a paper from Northwestern prospectively evaluated a generative AI model capable of providing draft radiology reports for radiographs, showing 15.5% document efficiency gain.
Welcome to Frame by Frame, Rethink Imaging, a podcast by Imalogics. Here, we explore the intricate world of medical imaging, aiming to dissect the field and inspire both professionals and curious minds alike. I'm your host, Chris St. John.
Welcome back to Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Dr. Woojin Kim, a renowned radiologist and pioneer in the field of medical AI. With over 2 decades of experience in clinical radiology and healthcare innovation, Dr. Kim has become a leader in integrating artificial intelligence into medical imaging. Currently, he is the Chief Strategy Officer and Chief Medical Information Officer at HOPPR and the Chief Medical Officer at the American College of Radiology Data Science Institute. Dr. Kim's work spans from co-founding successful healthcare startups to developing AI tools that revolutionize diagnostic workflows. Today in this episode, we're going to explore some of the challenges and some of the potential of GenAI in radiology and the importance of balancing, once again, human expertise with technology. Welcome to Frame by Frame, Dr. Kim. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for that kind introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a bunch of questions prepared. Before we get into those, let's just start high level. One, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself, honestly, on this podcast and doing what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to share my background. So again, my name is Woojin Kim. I'm a radiologist by background, and my subspecialty is in musculoskeletal radiology. And, I did all my training at UPenn, starting from medical school, residency, and even MSK fellowship. But during the year that I did my MSK fellowship, I took, one day out of the week. So every Monday through Thursday, I would do MSK fellowship. But every Friday, I would take Amtrak from Philadelphia to Baltimore to do a second fellowship in imaging informatics. And it was during that year that I learned a lot about imaging informatics. And it was also the year that I started my first company in radiology search engines. Then I decided, after I finished my training, I have no interest in academic radiology. I'm going to go into private practice. So I actually went into teleradiology for about 2 years. But after 2 years, I decided, you know what? I think I want to do something different. So despite my original decision, I decided to go back to UPenn to be a faculty member there. And I, climbed the classic academic ladder, eventually, becoming, interim section chief and everything. But also during that time, when I became an attending physician, I started my second company, Montage Healthcare. And as the second company ended up buying out the first company. So the first company exited that way. And Montage, we helped to grow for about 6.5 years. And we were installed in over 500 facilities, both US and Canada. And that was a search and data mining, applications for radiology. And we were acquired by Nuance. And I was a CMIO at Nuance for about 3.5 years. And I was there until, before they got acquired by Microsoft. And I left Nuance to start my third company called Equim Intelligence. That was using AI. I was trying to bring something that was used in supply chain world, like demand forecasting and capacity planning, and try to bring that into radiology. And I grew that company for about 2.5 years, and we got acquired by RedAI. And so I became the CMIO at RedAI for about 2 years. And then, after RSNA last year, Dr. Khan Siddiqui And this all connects because he was one of the mentors that taught me imaging informatics 20 years ago. And he used to joke around saying, "Hey, you know what, buddy? If you ever start startup number 4 and I'm not part of it, I am never talking to you again." So he said, "Hey, buddy, I really need you to help, HOPPR out." And, two buddies of mine, John Palat and, Bill Boone from Red AI, we decided, hey, after thinking about it, hey, you know what? Red AI is growing rapidly. It's in a very, very good space. Um, and, we felt that pretty comfortable leaving Red AI where it is and then to join us, much smaller startup to help that grow. Because if you look at my history, you can tell that, I like to take something small and help it to grow. And so we, during the 2 years that we were at Red AI, we really helped to grow that company significantly. I mean, obviously, right now it is one of the hottest AI company in radiology. And so we felt comfortable leaving that company and then help out another company, HOPPR. And so I've been with HOPPR since January this year. And then the other hat that I wear is I'm also the chief medical officer for the American College of Radiology Data Science Institute. So that means that, I also have to pay attention to the policy side and, aspect of the AI in radiology. So those are some of the things I do. I still practice radiology, very little, but I do. And then I guess my unofficial hat, full-time job, is giving talks. So somehow I guess I got labeled as one of the Gen AI guys in radiology. And so I've been invited to give a lot of talks. And I think this year I'll probably end up giving about 45 talks at this rate. So that's another thing that's keeping me
That's
quite
a lot
busy.
of presentations.
Yeah. So I'll pause right there.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, honestly, it's an interesting story. Like, it's it's fun to see you bouncing around and just like swapping out all of these hats. Um, yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. And it's been fun. I'm very blessed.
Well, good. Um, Okay, well, like let's get into it. So I did some research. We have some questions prepared. I did my research with the help of Gen AI. I was saying this to Dr. Kim before we started the recording, but for the authenticity of the experience, I can say this to my listeners as well. Um, but getting into it at ACR 2024, Dr. Kim, you predicted that we should expect a fully automated reporting system for chest X-ray and CT. What makes you feel confident that that level of automation is coming, and what needs to happen to implement it safely in a real department?
You're right. At the ACR 2024 annual meeting last year, I was given the opportunity to deliver the Morton lecture. And there I said, I'm going to get controversial here, but let me tell you that not only will you see AI automatically generate draft reports for chest x-rays, you will see automated draft reporting in CT exams. Now, to be honest with you, for chest x-rays, it wasn't much of a prediction because I knew technologically we already had the capability. For example, at the RSNA 2023 annual meeting, when I was a CMO at BedAI, we demonstrated a proof of concept for automatically generating a report from a chest x-ray. Now, the prediction part was talking about doing the same thing with CT exams. So was I right? Well, later that year, several papers were published that featured that particular technology, including MedGemini from Google, MedVersa from Harvard, and Merlin from Stanford, to name a few. Now, interestingly, the latter two became startups. Most recently, a paper from Northwestern prospectively evaluated a generative AI model capable of providing draft radiology reports for radiographs, showing 15.5% document efficiency gain. However, like you asked, there are many things that need to happen to implement this safely. First, obviously, it needs to generate accurate reports. Second, it needs to be tightly integrated into the radiologist workflow and incorporate personalization. Also, one aspect of radiology workflow that developers need to remember is what I call the dimension of time. And I don't mean turnaround times. We radiologists compare the current exam with prior exams and reports. And if these AI models cannot do that and only look at time point zero, well, that has limited clinical utility. Now, after that prediction, I also said, by the way, if I said this 5 years ago, I would have been booed out of the room. However, when I said that, no, I also knew that I wouldn't be booed out of the off the stage. Why? Because I've noticed a shift in perception regarding this. So, for example, at RSNA 2023, on the first day of the conference, guess what? I showed that particular capability, that proof of concept, to only a very few people that I knew personally because I wasn't sure what they would say. I didn't want them to say, "Hey, Woojin, what are you working on? Are you trying to replace us?" You know, but I can tell you by the next day, we were showing it to everyone because they were all saying, "Hey, when can I have this?" So the increasing burnout and radiology shortage, which I'm sure,
Right.
you've spoken with other,
Oh, yeah. We've covered
members,
that in
right?
quite a few
Many, many
episodes.
times, right? And that had changed things. And
Yeah.
that's why I felt pretty comfortable making that prediction as well as that statement in front of 1,000 radiologists.
Yeah, for sure. And then, RSNA 2024, that was my first time attending, but it was, I couldn't I couldn't take 2 steps without hitting another AI product, AI presentation talk. Um, it's it's around for sure. Honestly, like candidly, even to the point where only being around for a couple of years now myself, I'm like, yeah, we are talking about it. Like, it's hard to not have these conversations, I guess, is what I would be saying. You have said that technology should work for you, not the other way around in the context of AI. Can you give us an example of a Gen AI tool that maybe looks great on paper, but in practice kind of, I don't know, fails the usefulness test? Um, and what are the developers or researchers missing about radiology workflows?
Well, why don't I keep using the same example to illustrate the potential weakness? So, for example, the creating an automated draft radiology report from images has great potential uses. Now, if you follow me on LinkedIn, and you will see sometimes I will make posts where you see a post with a lot of red circles and writing, and you know that there are a lot of issues with that particular paper. And oftentimes it's because the researchers and developers fail to incorporate clinical domain expertise. And if I don't see a single radiologist on the authors list on a radiology AI paper, for me personally, that's a huge red flag. Not always, but oftentimes it causes lots of issues. Unfortunately, these generated outputs are often optimized for academic benchmarks like, blue scores, but those metrics have almost no correlation with what actually matters clinically. Now, I've seen many, quote unquote, state of the art models on paper that confidently tell you, and I see that on the figures, and that's why I circle in red. There is an inable, increase since the last exam when there was no prior exam or findings that simply aren't there. And speaking of priors, I always look for prior exams and read the prior reports when they exist. One of my attendings always used to tell me nothing makes you smarter than the prior reports, so don't forget to look at them. So if the AI solution only looks at the current exam, well, that's not going to be very useful. And unfortunately, right now, a lot of the solutions only look at the current exam. In fact, the dimension of time is one dimension that is often missing from these research papers. And the another major challenge will be the editing cost. So for certain exams, I will tell you, it'd probably be much faster for me to dictate from scratch than to, try to fix mostly correct AI report because, that means I have to re-verify every single line to make sure it's not hallucinating something critical. So if you're developing these solutions, you have to ask yourself, due to their design, am I increasing or am I decreasing the cognitive load of the radiologist? And finally, if your AI solution, generative AI or not, isn't integrated into my existing workflow, I can tell you, I don't care how pretty your application looks. That's an example of what you asked me earlier about, technology not working for me, but the other way around. So the bottom line is that, the designers and developers need to start in the high pressure reality of an actual radiology reading room. They need to go there and sit there and watch the radiologist work rather than, chasing leaderboard scores in isolation, which a lot of papers do.
while we're talking about reports, right? I mean, radiologists are extremely particular about the report style. Um, you've noted that adoption improves when the AI sounds like a radiologist is using it. Can you just build on that a little bit more? Like, why is it so important and how is it impacting patient care and communication rather than just personal preference?
Yeah, and I say this often in my talks, and I usually say, "Hey, I can say this because I'm a radiologist. We like the way we sound." And I say this, and I can say that because I'm a radiologist, right? The caveat, however, is that everyone is different. So let me give you an example to illustrate what I mean by this. Let's say a resident or fellow, drafts a report about a particular exam after a readout session with an attending radiologist. Afterward, that attending radiologist has to go into the reporting solution and, sign off on that report. On one end of the spectrum, you have attendings who will be like, yeah, sure, it doesn't sound like me, but it's good enough. And they'll just sign off with very little or no editing. However, I've also seen the other side of the spectrum, and this is real, where literally the attending would go, select all, delete, and redictate the whole thing from scratch, even though the draft report is technically correct. Why? Because it doesn't sound anything like them. Now, if you speak with a lot of the practice leaders and department heads, they'll tell you where, they like to ideally have more uniform standard reports. However, there are also plenty of radiologists that can tell you who simply won't use a system if it generates a text that doesn't sound like them. The post editing work isn't worth the time. And this is why, for many AI applications, I advocate keeping in mind the importance of personalization. Now, it's not necessary for every solution in the radiology workflow, but it is a component often overlooked in research papers and many commercial solutions as well. And yet, it's an important aspect I personally observed in my industry role. So, I'll give you a real example. So when I was at Red AI, obviously, it's a company that's been known for creating the automated, impression generation. And it if you hear why they like it, one of the reasons why radiologists like this particular solution is they will tell you like, yeah, this thing sounds like me. And in Einstein, they actually did an experiment one time where they, printed out a whole bunch of reports that were generated by the radiologists, and then print out a whole bunch of reports that were generated using this, automated solution, impression generation. They mixed them up and they showed the radiologists, hey, which one was, Red AI solution versus you, and they couldn't tell the difference. And so for me, when I heard that, I realized like, yeah, I have an intuitive sense that personalization is important. But when I see it in the actual, clinical use, then I really got to, get a new appreciation for the importance of this. Not everyone's going to care about personalization, but I'll tell you for those who do, that actually makes a huge difference. And that's one of those things that I rarely ever see in research papers. They're always trying to, have some kind of a metric and say, hey, we just beat this, metric by 0.05, type of thing. But at the end of the day, just, we're human and, you got to have that human aspect.
Well, that's exactly what I was about to say. Like, it is just so deeply inherently human to want that from the content, right? Like, even just when I'm using ChatGPT to help like clean up an email or whatever it is, as soon as I see that like stereotypical AI voice tone and just like loaded with EM dashes, I'm just like, I lose my mind. Like it drives me insane up the wall. I'm like, no, 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 no. I like this feels inhuman and therefore I do not like it.
Perfect, perfect. I think people now that they're using ChatGPT, they have better appreciation of exactly what I'm talking about. And it's funny that you mentioned the M dashes because I saw that, many posts, people saying, "Oh yeah, I know when you use ChatGPT because you use M dashes." The thing is, I've been using M dashes long before ChatGPT. It's really, really, I feel like, oh man, like I don't want to delete it because I don't want to sound like ChatGPT. But here's the thing, that to that point about the automated impression, the reason, that was actually the thing that became really popular right after ChatGPT came out from a research perspective, because people realized like, oh, I can use, chatbots like ChatGPT and LLMs to automatically generate impression. Now, I have to say, Red AI has been doing this commercially long before ChatGPT. But the thing is that, people started publishing papers on this and say, hey, yeah, you can use ChatGPT and, it can generate, impressions for you. But I'll tell you, what I say in my talks is that, yeah, if you will give it a ChatGPT a set of findings and ask you to create an impression, it does create a pretty good looking impression. But to exactly what you said, the reason why you personalize your ChatGPT instance, I'm sure you have done that with prompting and examples and projects and all kinds of tools that we have, is because, hey, you know what? That doesn't sound like me. I'm not gonna copy and paste that thing in. And same thing happens in radiology too. It's like, yes, technically it's correct, but I don't sound like that. I don't talk like that. And therefore, if I were to copy and paste, I'm gonna have to edit it. And as soon as I edit it, I lose all my efficiency gains. And it's just better for me to do it on my own. And so you really need to think about a personalization. And thankfully, things like ChatGPT, because you're right, now people are pretty attuned to it. Like, oh God, this guy used a chatbot for his writing. So you were trying to make it help you write like you. I think the personalization. I think people have a renewed appreciation for that aspect of AI tools. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, just small little anecdote. I just got sent a link from my employer for a company workspace within ChatGPT, and I had been working on my version of it for the last however many months, um, and now having to start fresh again. I'm like, no. So I'm like having it generate all of these prompts to try and transfer my voice over, but immediately within the new workspace, I was just like, nope, doing it myself. Just like this is like trying to reteach it. I'm like, I don't have the time for this. I'm just gonna edit it. I'm just gonna edit this on my own. And so, I mean, let's pivot a little bit. You already mentioned hallucinations a little bit ago, and it's something that it's inevitably going to come up when talking about Gen AI. In radiology specifically, though, how big of a risk is the AI making something up? Have you seen examples of confident misreporting, and how do we mitigate that risk for these reports?
Well, hallucination or confabulation is absolutely a legitimate concern in radiology AI, and frankly, it should be. And unlike chatbots making up facts about movies, when an AI fabricates findings in a medical report, that directly impacts patient care. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of expos where people uploaded their images to ChatGPT or Grok and share their outputs. But let me tell you, as of today, these general purpose AI models are not ready for making any type of imaging diagnosis, no matter who says what. First of all, they're not medical devices. But more importantly, for every correct case that you see online, I can tell you there are many, many more alarming examples of confident misreporting and misdiagnosis. And I just recently read, I think earlier this week, that, these chatbots have gradually, companies have removed the standard disclaimer about how these should not be used for medical diagnosis. And I'm sorry, but that is simply irresponsible. Yeah.
It's been taken out.
So it used to be always when you put in something about medical diagnosis, related thing. First of all, sometimes, these chatbots say, hey, look, I can't do this. And then, but, people have found a way to, get around it. And if you do make them do it, it will always say, hey, you should consult, medical professionals. This is not a real medical diagnosis, blah, blah, blah. So they would have these standard disclaimer. But this research paper just came out. It hasn't gone through the peer review process yet, but they have noticed that there's been a significant decrease in the number of times that these things will actually show you this disclaimer. I'm sure it's hidden in some fine print somewhere, that no one reads, but actual interactions with a user, it just doesn't show. And people have the authors have made some hypothesis as of why this is happening, but the reality is it looks like they're doing it less and less and less. And I think this is dangerous. I mean, yes, I mean people probably will ignore those disclaimers anyway, but still, as a company, you can't just not say it because you think people are gonna, ignore it. So, but the scariest part about this hallucination or confabulation is how plausible these reports sound. they use like proper medical terminology and they follow standard formatting. I mean, if you didn't look at the images and you just looked at the outputs, they look completely legitimate, even to a radiologist. And so this is why, I always emphasize we need human in the loop workflows where radiologists maintain, full control. This means instead of simply saying AI alone is better than AI plus human, which is another topic. By the way, there are a lot of issues with these, types of papers from a methodology perspective. But we need to figure out at the end how to create that optimal human AI symbiosis. For example, the AI should show its work, highlighting, which parts of the image support each finding it reports. And the radiologists themselves also need to be educated not only on AI and its limitations, but also on the best ways to interact with it. Kind of like the way you described, like over time, you learn how to use ChatGPT and these tools to, really help you do what you do. So I advise in my lectures typically first, learn about AI and especially for younger audience, I say number two, learn to learn. And third, learn to think critically. And I think that last part is, something that we're losing. So I would say approach AI as a co-pilot, not autopilot.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it to me, it feels like right now, like Gen AI is it's almost like the new methodology of how we interact with the internet, which is wild. But like, I rarely go to Google anymore to search for something because why would I? It's I'm getting fed a bunch of ads first and then it's just like a mess. SEO is confusing and confounding and I can never find what I want. And I can talk to my little chatbot friend and they pull up exactly what I need. It's like it's the whole methodology of how we are interacting with our technology is changing into a conversation, which to me is just really fascinating. So, you made this transition from reading scans to building AI tools. How has the shift changed the way that you view the daily work of a radiologist?
I mean, to be fair, I still, practice radiology. And so for me, it's always the same thing, like comes down to the same thing, which is to really try to identify the pain points and try to solve that. Um, Even though I have switched, mostly to the industry side, I do still practice. Granted, not every day. Um, and people ask me, what do you, why do you still practice radiologist? And there are a couple reasons. One of them is um, I know radiology, but I also need to feel the pain that the radiologists are going through. Knowing about them is not enough. I can read about all the challenges of radiologists, but it's very different when I'm actually in the reading room and going through the thing and realizing, like, hey, you know what? This is really painful. And that helps me to be a better developer and better, entrepreneur. That's one thing. And a little bit more selfishly, I will tell you, if I'm in in a room in front of a bunch of radiologists and I'm trying to sell my solution, it's much more effective for me to say, "Hey, I'm a practicing radiologist," than to say, "Hey, I used to be one." And so, um, there's some street credibility, associated with it as well too. And so that's why, like, for me, it's like I do, try to, still, maintain keep my foot in the trenches a little bit because I need to feel the pain, not just know about the pain.
Right. And so, I mean, you have your entrepreneur hat, right? And then you also have your ACR leadership hat. To throw both hats on, if you could, what do you think the biggest barrier to implementing Gen AI in radiology is right now? Is it technical? Is it cultural? Is it legal? Is it?
That's a great question that really gets to the heart of what we're dealing with in 2025. And the short answer is it's multifactorial. The hallucination and confabulation problem that we just described is improving, but let's face it, it still has not disappeared. So since we're just specifically talking about Gen AI, given the gravity of the problem that these things can cause, it is still an issue that you cannot ignore, especially in medicine. And the other big barriers are, like you said. regulatory and liability clarity, or frankly, the lack thereof. For example, we have zero FDA cleared devices that use large language models today. And there is a lot of uncertainty and lack of clarity on this. And the liability question is another one. Yes, the radiologists take liability at the end, but what about the hospital that purchased it or the company that made the AI solution? And right now, there is a lot of uncertainty. And I sometimes get asked questions about this too, about the medical, the legal liability about all these solutions. And my simple answer is, honestly, I don't think we will know until there is like a massive lawsuit, class action lawsuit about this. And then depending on how the judge and the jury and they decide, will determine like, yeah, this is what the medical liability looks like. Because until I mean, I don't want to see that either, especially, wearing the hats that I wear. But I almost feel like something like that has to happen for us to get clarity on it, because right now there is no clarity. It's everyone's guess. Like if you ever go to a panel discussion about, if you pose that exact same question right now, people will say, well, I don't know, because there is no FDA clear, devices that use SLR. So it's anybody's guess, anybody's, opinion. It's just matter of opinion. And same thing with the medical legal liability. How much liability do these things carry? No one knows because there's no clarity on it. So these are some of the challenges, but I suspect, more and more as, these solutions get used, I think we'll hopefully get some clarity, but it is impacting some of the decision making and development processes and things like that. So yes, good question.
To take it even further, right? I saw that you've been discussing, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing this right, agentic
Yeah,
AI?
agentic. Yeah, agentic
Agentic?
AI. Yep, yep.
So for folks who are new to the term,
Sure.
outside of me who just read a Gen AI definition of it, would you mind describing agentic AI in specifically like within the context of radiology and what it could actually do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. And most people just like, man, I just got used to understanding what Gen AI is, and then
Next
everybody
level.
talks agentic AI agents. So let me first talk about AI agents. And you're right, there has been considerable hype around the term AI agents or agentic AI lately. In fact, many have referred to 2025 as the year of AI agents. Unfortunately, though, despite widespread discussion on this topic, there is no universally agreed upon definition. So I cannot give you that. But I think it's easier for me to explain it by describing what it isn't. So let's say, you know, you ask an LLM-based chatbot like ChatGPT to give you a day trip itinerary to San Diego, just because I live in Southern California. And it gives you this great itinerary. Now, when you ask which day of the week next week you have your day off, guess what? It won't be able to answer because it doesn't have access to your calendar. Often these chatbots don't have access to proprietary knowledge and tend to be passive, meaning they won't do anything until you ask a question. Okay, so keep that in mind. So, what if you connect that chatbot to your calendar, which you can do now? Sure, then you'll be able to answer that question. But what if you follow that question with another question saying, hey, okay, great. So can you tell me the weather for next Wednesday? And it will fail unless that chatbot also has access to local weather data as well. And sure, you can connect it to a weather service API, but this is simply what I call an AI workflow. I can connect many additional services and tools, but at the end, if a human is the decision maker, there is no AI agent involvement. In contrast, when you give an AI agent a goal, it will proceed to reason, typically using an LLM, to plan and act, meaning, it will execute using tools. And some people, call this combination React framework, reason and act. And now some people, consider though, this is enough to call something an AI agent if it can reason and act. But for me, I think it needs to then go further to observe, to gather feedback and reflect, meaning, review and adjust strategies, and finally iterate, which I think is a really important component to me personally about what it constitutes an AI agent, meaning that it will repeat as needed to ultimately achieve a goal. So you give a goal, AI agent, keeps iterating, comes up with the plan, iterate until it achieves a goal. And another, simple way to think about it is to think of an AI workflow as being more linear, linear, whereas an AI agent or agentic workflow is more circular. And of course, not to get even more complicated, not to confuse even more, but believe it or not, actually even differentiate the term agentic AI, which is a framework for turning a goal into plans, from AI agent, the thing that actually performs the action. So some people use it synonymously, and some people are like, no, you can't use them synonymously. They're two different things. So, but you will see these two terms in the media quite a bit. So one thing I would definitely tell you, probably I'll be honest with you, I don't usually like to make predictions, but if I were to force to make one about agentic AI in radiology, is that at this RSNA, I'm sure you're gonna see vendors claiming to leverage agentic AI, when in reality they're using like if and then deterministic AI workflows. Okay, now to be totally clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with an AI workflow. In fact, I usually advocate from a more practical perspective, a hybrid approach of using AI workflow and agentic AI for many use cases, but just be wary of the industry hype around them, because that industry hype that you're seeing outside is going to come to radiology, and at RSNA, you are going to see this. And so since you asked about radiology specific example, so I'll go into that a little bit now that I described, what is an AI agent. In radiology, agentic AI is like having an intelligent colleague who can, independently manage an entire workflow to achieve a broader goal, right? So to reiterate, what makes something quote unquote agentic is autonomy and adaptability. So what could it actually do? Well, this goes back to my emphasis on the non-interpretive use cases, some of the, things that I focused on in my previous startups, where, instead of just like looking at uh the imaging value chain in radiology, where everybody just focusing on the image interpretation aspect of it, you can imagine having agentic AI benefiting all aspect of the imaging value chain. Picture an AI that handles your entire pre-read workflow, triaging urgent cases and selecting optimal imaging protocols and gathering all relevant patient data. And, during interpretation, it's not just, flagging abnormalities. That's what you're seeing today, but performing like comprehensive analysis, measuring tumor volumes. Then it knows that, oh my God, now I need to track it, changes over time. And then realize that, okay, I need to then take this and integrate with the lab results and clinical notes to suggest differential diagnosis for you. Now, to your question, is this science fiction or is this reality? And I would say it's not a moonshot thing. Okay. We're already seeing some of the building blocks for this, believe it or not. So in the near future, I think you can expect augmented AI to handle sequences of tasks with human oversight. So just to highlight why this is not a science fiction, this past sim, this year, the HOPPR team actually won first place by demonstrating at the hackathon agentic AI in radiology by using MCPs, or model context protocols, another term that you probably heard quite a bit outside of radiology, to provide greater context to radiology during interpretation by using FIRE MCP and also DICOM MCP.
Would you mind explaining that term for me, please?
Model context protocol, really, really simply put, some people have, described it almost like it's not the perfect, most perfect description, but I think, to keep it really, really simple, it's like having USB-C or creating it. So, for example, like, when the AI agent, I remember I told you that, AI agent would, what makes it agent is that its ability to use tools, right? And for me to use like tools, different tools, say, for radiology, for me to say, grab, the DICOM images, or go to the EMR and get the patient's history or the reasons for exams or lab values. Okay. I need the agent to be able to use tools. But here's the thing, from the agent to use tools, because these tools are made by different folks, they need to use different APIs, right? And there's a lot of complexity around that, right? And as an agent builder, agent needs to like know which API to use and make sure that it's deprecated. Oh my God, why is it not working? Oh, they got a new version and blah blah blah. And this API works different than this API and this API. So it becomes extremely complicated. The beautiful thing about the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, is that it uses the same method to connect with all the tools. Kind of like, instead of having USB A, C, and all of these things, literally, I don't care what you do. I just need to just use the same thing to connect with you. So it's like being everybody saying like, hey, we use USB-C. So if you got a USB-C cable, you can connect. It's kind of like that to put it the most simplest way. But the idea is the MCP allows it to allow you to like connect to a lot of different tools in a very easy manner. And so I don't know if you use Claude. As I know you mentioned, ChatGPT, but if you use Claude, one of the things that I use all the time, and I absolutely love it, is I use the Claude desktop and I use the MCP. And so now if you actually are using Claude, you will be able to see like how you can connect with different services. And so, I connect with my Gmails and my Google Calendar all through the Claude interface. And I could literally ask questions, saying, "Hey, what meetings do I have today?" And can you, just like you could literally imagine if you were to be able to prompt the cloud and say, and in fact, I do this every morning. It's my daily routine. I have like an actual prompt where I say, "Hey, you know what? Go through my calendar and tell me who I'm meeting with. When was the last time I had discussion with them? So go through my email chain and summarize, my previous conversations with this person. Why am I meeting today? What's the objective? What's the goal? And then if, it's about a company, then I actually asked, Claude to say, hey, give me a summary of what this company does. And so it would then give me a whole, you know, today's itinerary. And it's doing that through Claude. And it's can do that because of MCPs. And so what we did at SIM was to, hey, let's bring that in radiology. We got all these disparate silo systems. And so let's, by creating these, fire MCPs and DICOM MCPs and be able to, show this. And so it was a hackathon prototype, but I think this is another exciting thing that a lot of people are not talking about it right now. But it's something that I think you will see more and more because, and it's going to like really explode the development as we are seeing outside of radiology with, you're seeing new things coming out every single day, literally. And that's because of, the openness of the community and things like this. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like the point in the exponential curve where we're like right before we go vertical.
But if you were to ask me, and because I'll share this with you because I shared this example illustration in my talks to talk about agentic AI and the future of it as it relates to radiology. I mean, I obviously share with you what we did at the hackathon, but my personal agentic AI choice, if I were to able to do it today, it would be something like something I saw, several years ago, where I saw a teleradiologist. He said, "Hey, you know what? I want to show you how I work." So a number of colleagues and I, went to visit his reading room. And when we went in, he had 6 huge monitors in front of him, right? And in front of his desk, which was like really big, he had 6 mice. And that's because there was no IT system that can handle this guy's unique workflow I'm about to describe for you. So behind them, though, sat 6 scribes with their own workstations. All right. Now, each of the 6 scribes was responsible for one of the 6 monitors. You see where I'm going with this, right? And so when he sat down to work, he would look up and the scribe number 1 would put up the first case. Scribe number 2, second case, and so forth. So he would look at the first screen and he says, it's a chest x-ray, left lower lung pneumonia, left side of pleural effusion. That's all he would say. Then he moves on to the second case and he uses second mice and, scroll up and down. He says, small vessel ischemic disease, impression, no acute intracranial hemorrhage. That's it. And he goes on and on, right? And so by the time he gets to case number 3 or 4, scribe number 1 says, hey, Dr. So-and-so, I have first case ready for you. And then the scribe would put up the reporting solution screen with all the structured reports and the reports all made out. And then he just looks and goes, yeah, that looks good, sign off. So here's the thing. This guy was reading 3 to 4 times what most radiologists would read. But the difference was that he looked extremely relaxed. So relaxed that, after 3 or 4 cases, he would turn around and, he would chat with us, asking about us. And then he goes to, case number 5 and 6 and chatting with the scribes. And he was very relaxed. And so when I saw that, I realized like, oh my God, imagine like, looking back, this was several years ago. And for me, like when you ask me about agentic AI in radiology, I'm thinking like, what if instead of those 6 scribes, you had 6 agents, just running in the background, doing all that for you? how much would radiologists would love that kind of solution. So that's kind of like where I see as sort of the North Star for some of the, not the only solution, obviously, but one of the potential solutions when it comes to agentic AI. And hopefully that explains with that beginning to the end, we would now have a better understanding of, yeah, now I think I understand agentic AI.
I like that example that you gave me as well, because like upon your description of agentic AI, there was almost a piece of me that I was like, it sounds like the human element is being removed to some degree, but it was nice to hear the larger context in which you're talking about.
That's right.
Um,
So I want to emphasize that rather than
yeah.
replacing radiologists, this technology has the potential to create a true partnership that
Hmm.
can make us radiologists more efficient and accurate. And that's for me as a radiologist, that's how I want my agent to work. Not like, oh, there's a radiologist agent and he or it could just go and read a whole bunch of cases, on its own. And that's not, what I envision as quote unquote agentic AI.
Dr. Kim, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts to give our listeners before we let you go today?
Yeah. So what I would say is, this is an exciting technology, and I really urge anyone listening to learn about AI. I said earlier, like, learn about AI, learn to learn and learn to think, critically. All these things are important. But, when I say learn about AI, it's not just about reading about it. And I'll be honest, I'll tell you, I've been very fortunate and I've been very blessed. And I'm extremely grateful that every company that I've been with, whether it's mine or, somebody after being, acquired, they always allow me to, keep reading. And I spend about 4 to 6 hours reading about AI every single day. And I know that most people don't have that kind of luxury and time. But, one thing I will tell you is that it's not just about reading. You really have to play with the AI solutions. You gotta actually get your hands dirty. And so one thing that I recommend is instead of just like reading about AI, that's a great start. But I really encourage people to play with different tools, like, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude Midjourney to make images or VO3 to, create some videos or, Hey Gen to, create an avatar of yourself to, just or 11 Labs to just to see, what, AI voices technology is like, because you get to learn about its limitations and what it can and cannot do by actually using AI. So one thing I highly suggest folks is to really use AI and not just read about it, and this is going to be extremely important. And so, one thing I will definitely close out by saying, AI should be absolutely be our, powerful assistant, helping us catch things we might miss, improving our efficiency, even, suggesting differential diagnoses. But at the end of the day, a human radiologist needs to be the one, that's making the final call and standing behind it. And so, one of the things that if I can really encourage the developers that are listening is to really think about the domain expertise. This is not just about technology. It's not just about the algorithm or the model architecture. There's a real human behind this technology that's using it to impact other patients' lives. And so, you gotta look beyond just the technical aspect of it, really incorporate clinical domain expertise. And instead of trying to, replace radiologists, think about like, hey, how can I augment the radiologist in this process? And so really think about how do I, improve the human AI symbiosis instead of simply saying, oh, obviously AI is doing it, better by itself. At the end of the day, when you get sick, you are going to find a human doctor and you want that human doctor who sees you to be at the best at, his or her, um, practice. So at their, be able to practice at the top of their license. And so if you can help them do that, that'd be great. So those are some of the things that I like to, conclude by. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kim. It has been truly a pleasure having you today. Thank you so much for
Pleasure.
joining us on Frame by Frame, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.
Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging is brought to you by Imalogics. Here, you'll find engaging interviews with thought leaders, experts, and patients, sharing stories that showcase the transformative power of medical imaging. To discover how Imalogics is rethinking imaging in healthcare, visit imalogics.com. Be sure to subscribe to Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And from all of us here at Imalogics, thanks for tuning in.